Let me be brutally honest with you. If you're doing no contact to make them miss you, you're not detached. You're just silent in a different way, because you can delete the chat, block the number, disappear completely, and still wake up with your mind reaching for them like they're oxygen. That's not peace. That's withdrawal wearing a suit. And here's the part most people don't see. There's something that hurts more than your silence ever could. Not because it's cruel, because it's final. In this episode, we're going to expose the illusion behind tactical silence, and I'm going to give you one clear sign that proves whether you've actually let go or you're still waiting in the hallway. Let's start right there, because waiting in the hallway isn't just a metaphor. It's a measurable state. It shows up in what you do when no one is watching, in what your mind reaches for in the quiet moments, in how your body tightens when you imagine their name on your screen. So the first question is simple, and it's going to expose everything. Are you silent because you're free, or are you silent because you're hoping they notice? Most people don't like that question because it destroys the comfort of the strategy. Silence feels powerful when you can call it self-respect. It feels clean when you can label it discipline. But if your silence is loaded, if it's charged with hope, with revenge, with the need to be remembered, then you haven't stepped out of the relationship. You've just stepped into a quieter version of it. You're still oriented toward them. You're still measuring your worth against their reaction. You're still building your peace on an outcome you can't control. Here's what waiting actually looks like. You say you're done, but you still check for signals, subtle ones, even innocent ones. You notice who viewed what. You wonder if they asked about you. You replay the last conversation and rewrite it in your head like there's a version where you win. You tell yourself you don't care, but your nervous system still spikes when a notification appears, because some part of you is still hoping it's them. That is not freedom. That is attachment, just dressed up in silence. Stoicism is ruthless about this, in a way that's meant to set you free. If your emotional state changes based on something outside you, whether they reach out, whether they don't, whether they seem happy, whether they seem hurt, then you're still giving them access to your inner world. You're still letting external events edit your mood. That's the opposite of sovereignty. That's living on a leash, even if it's a longer one. So here's the clear sign I promised you, and it's uncomfortable because it's honest. If you knew for a fact, absolute certainty, that they would never check on you again, never miss you, never return, would you still be doing no contact the same way? Would you still feel strong in your silence? Or would the silence suddenly feel pointless, even painful, because it was never about peace? It was about being noticed. Your answer tells you whether your silence is a boundary or a performance. And if you're listening to this and realizing, I'm still waiting, don't shame yourself. This is normal. The mind clings, the body remembers. But seeing it clearly is the first real step toward detachment, because now you can stop using silence as a message and start using it as a home. And once you're honest about what you're really doing, we can go deeper, because the next layer isn't about your behavior at all. It's about the wound underneath it. The real reason you're still hooked, the part of you that doesn't just miss them, it misses being seen. What makes this so hard is that no contact usually isn't just about the other person. It's about what their attention used to prove to you. Because when someone pulls away, the pain isn't only the loss of them, it's the sudden fear that your value disappears with them. And that's why silence becomes a ritual, not a calm one, a desperate one, a way to say, I still matter, without actually saying it. Underneath the strategy, there's usually a quieter hunger. The need to be seen correctly, the need to be understood, the need for your pain to be recognized as real. This is the part most people don't admit out loud. They don't just want the person back. They want the person to finally understand what they did. They want their absence to speak in perfect sentences. They want their silence to translate into a confession. I was wrong. I didn't value you. I see you now. And when that doesn't happen, the mind starts writing speeches. You rehearse what you'd say if they called. You draft long messages you never send. You explain yourself 100 different ways, as if the right paragraph could rewrite the past. But the more you chase being understood, the more you stay emotionally tied to someone who may never give you that closure. Stoicism cuts through this with a hard but freeing truth. Your peace can't depend on someone else's interpretation of you, because the moment you need their understanding, you hand them power over your inner world. You're basically saying, I can't be whole until you agree with my reality. And that's a dangerous deal, because they can refuse it forever. They can misunderstand you forever. They can rewrite you in their mind and still sleep at night. That's not fair. But it's real. And the fastest way to stop suffering is to stop trying to win a trial that's happening in someone else's head. So the real move isn't the final message. It's the moment you stop auditioning for respect. It's when you let them keep their story and you keep your dignity. If this is hitting something personal for you, tap like, not as a routine, but as a signal to yourself that you're choosing clarity over obsession. And now we need to go even deeper, because the reason this craving is so intense isn't only psychological, it's biological. Your nervous system is still hooked, and until you understand that, you'll keep calling it love when it's really withdrawal. And once you see that the real trap is the need to be understood, the next question becomes almost unavoidable. If you've already accepted that they may never get it, why does your body still react like they're your oxygen? Why does a single notification, a single memory, a single glimpse of their name still spike your heart and hijack your focus? This is where the conversation stops being motivational and becomes honest, because a lot of what you call attachment is not a moral weakness. It's a nervous system pattern that's been trained. Your brain doesn't experience that person as an idea. It experiences them as a loop, a reward cycle, the anticipation, the relief, the uncertainty, the tiny bursts of dopamine from attention, the emotional spikes from distance. All of it conditions you. And that's why no contact can feel like strength on day 1 and like withdrawal on day 3. You're not just missing them. You're missing the chemical rhythm your body learned to depend on. The mind says, move on, but the body says, danger, loss, emergency. And until you respect that gap, you'll keep shaming yourself for feelings that are basically biology doing what it was designed to do: attach, anticipate, and protect. This is also why tactical silence often backfires internally, because you're still secretly checking for a result. You're still scanning for signs. You're still living in a state of alertness, and alertness is not peace. It's a stress posture. It's your nervous system staying on duty. And the most painful part is that the body doesn't care if you're doing it for self-respect. If your attention is still pointed at them, your body still reads it as dependence. That's why you can be silent and still feel exhausted. You're not resting, you're monitoring, you're not healing, you're waiting. So here's what changes everything. You stop treating your reactions as evidence that you're weak, and you start treating them as data. If your heart races when their name appears, that's not destiny, it's conditioning. If you feel a drop in your stomach, that's not love's proof. It's your nervous system remembering a pattern. And the Stoic move here isn't to fight the feeling. It's to see it clearly, name it without drama, and create a new pattern through behavior. Not grand speeches, small, repeated acts that teach your body. We are safe without this, because the body learns through repetition, not reasoning. If this part just made you feel less ashamed, hit like, because that's the first real step toward freedom, replacing self-judgment with self-understanding. And now we're ready for the turning point of the entire episode. The moment that hurts more than silence ever could. The moment they lose emotional access to your nervous system and you feel nothing at all. And this is where the whole story flips, because once you understand that your reactions are conditioning, not character, you stop fighting your feelings like they're enemies, and you start training them like they're signals. But there's a moment beyond training, beyond discipline, beyond staying strong, and it's the moment that hurts more than your silence ever could. Not because it's cruel, but because it's final. It happens quietly, almost anticlimactically. You're doing something ordinary, making coffee, walking to your car, sitting at your desk, and their name appears. Maybe it's a notification. Maybe it's a mutual friend mentioning them. Maybe it's just a memory that usually hits like a punch, and you brace for impact because your body has learned to brace. You expect the familiar surge, the spike of hope, the jolt of anger, the impulse to analyze, the urge to prove something, the ache that says, "This still matters." You expect your nervous system to light up like a control room, but this time, it doesn't. Nothing rises. No quickening in your chest, no heat in your throat, no inner monologue sprinting to the finish line, no performance of indifference, no desperation disguised as dignity, just a flat, calm stillness. And the strangest part is that the stillness doesn't feel like victory at first. It feels like a door closing somewhere deep inside you, a quiet click, a final decision your body made without asking your permission. This is the loss of emotional access, and it's unsettling because it reveals the truth. What they were really holding wasn't your love. It was your nervous system, your attention, your internal weather. As long as they could trigger you, even through silence, they still had influence. Even your anger was a form of connection. Even your longing was a thread. But when you become unreachable inside yourself, the thread snaps. Not theatrically, not dramatically, just over. That's why this hurts more than your silence. Silence can be interpreted. Silence can be challenged. Silence can be broken in one late-night moment. But inner indifference can't be negotiated with. It doesn't bargain. It doesn't explain. It doesn't ask for closure. It simply moves on. And when someone realizes they can't reach your nervous system anymore, they don't feel ignored. They feel erased from the control panel. They feel the absence of the tug they used to rely on. You haven't slammed the door. You've walked so far away that the door doesn't matter. And here's the deeper truth. This isn't coldness. It's peace returning to its owner. It's your body finally learning that it can survive without the loop. It's the end of the internal war. It's also the end of the game, because games require reaction. Once reaction is gone, strategy dies. And that's why people who were once powerful in your mind suddenly become ordinary, not hated, not adored, just human, just another name in the world. If you've ever tasted even 1 second of that calm, hit like, because that moment is proof you're not trapped, you're healing. And now we have to build the foundation that keeps that peace stable, because indifference without inner structure can fade, and the next step is the Stoic core, reclaiming your proheresis, the part of you that chooses from peace, not from pull. And once you've felt what real indifference looks like, Once you've tasted that quiet moment where nothing rises inside you, the next challenge isn't staying silent. The real challenge is staying sovereign, because peace can visit you and then leave again if you don't build a structure that can hold it. This is where Stoicism stops being a philosophy you quote and becomes a skill you practice. And the core skill is one word the Stoics treated like sacred ground: prohairesis, your inner faculty of choice. It's a difficult word, but the idea is simple. There is a part of you that cannot be touched by another person's behavior, not their praise, not their rejection, not their silence, not their sudden return. Prohairesis is the place in you that chooses your attitude, chooses your response, chooses what you give meaning to. It's the difference between a person who reacts and a person who decides. And if you're honest, most of the pain after a breakup isn't just grief. It's the feeling that your inner world is still being edited by someone who no longer lives in your life. This is why tactical no contact collapses so often, because it's not driven by choice. It's driven by hope. It's driven by the craving for a reaction. And hope can be beautiful, but in this context, it becomes a leash. You're silent, but you're still waiting for them to validate the silence. The Stoics would call that slavery, quiet slavery, but slavery all the same, because your emotional state is still outsourced. Your peace is still conditional. Your dignity is still negotiating. Prohairesis is how you stop negotiating. It's the moment you say, I don't need to know what they think to know who I am. It's the moment you stop checking your worth against their attention. And it's not a dramatic declaration. It's a daily decision made in small moments, when the memory comes, when the urge to check appears, when your mind tries to reopen the door just to see if anything changed on the other side. In those moments, prohairesis is not a concept, it's a muscle. You either use it or you don't. Here's what that looks like in real life. Your phone buzzes and your body tightens before you even know who it is. Or you wake up and the first thought is them, like your mind is reporting for duty. Or you're alone at night and the loneliness tries to convince you that breaking your boundary would be closure. Prohairesis is the pause right there, the space where you don't obey the first impulse. You don't argue with it. You don't dramatize it. You simply choose. You choose the action that keeps your peace intact, not the action that feeds your craving for relief. And this is the deeper twist. You don't reclaim your power by hating them. Hatred still ties you to them. You reclaim your power by removing them from the control room of your inner life. You stop giving them the privilege of shaping your mood. You stop letting their imagined opinion decide your next move. You stop living as if your worth is a debate that needs their vote. The Stoics were relentless about this. Epictetus especially would tell you that external events don't command your soul unless you hand them the keys. And the most radical form of healing is taking the keys back without announcing it, without proving it, without needing a witness. Just quiet ownership. Quiet direction, quiet self-respect that doesn't need to be explained. So here's the question that makes this practical, not poetic. What is the next choice you can make that returns authority to you? Not a huge life overhaul. One choice. Maybe it's refusing to check their profile. Maybe it's deleting the draft you keep rewriting. Maybe it's moving your body when the urge spikes, so your nervous system learns a new path. Maybe it's saying, not today, to the thought that wants to romanticize the past. One clean choice, made from peace, not pull. And once you start living from that inner faculty of choice, something changes in a way you can feel. Your calm stops being a lucky moment. It becomes a pattern. And from that pattern, you can do the next essential work. The work that keeps prohairesis stable over time, reclaiming your energy, your attention, and your daily life from the slow leak of longing. And once you begin choosing from peace instead of pull, you start noticing a hard truth that's been quietly draining you the whole time. You haven't just been missing a person, you've been leaking energy into a past that cannot pay you back. And the more honest you get about that leak, the more you realize healing isn't only an emotional decision, it's an energetic one. You don't just move on by thinking better thoughts. You move on by reclaiming attention, reclaiming time, reclaiming your day from the invisible rituals of longing. Most people think the breakup is the wound, but the real wound is what happens after. The constant micro-investments you keep making in someone who is no longer investing in you. The tiny checks, the mental replays, the background scanning of what if, the little fantasy that maybe they'll finally understand. None of that looks dramatic on the outside, but it adds up to a life lived half here, half there, and nothing in your life can fully grow if your attention is split like that. Even your peace becomes fragile, because peace can't live in a mind that keeps returning to the same door to see if it's unlocked. So the next step is not willpower. It's energy reclamation, turning your attention into property you protect, not a resource you waste. The Stoics would call this discipline of the mind, but I want to make it concrete. Your attention is your life. Wherever you place it, you are feeding something. If you feed the past stays alive inside you. If you feed your present starts to strengthen. And the reason this matters is simple. The nervous system doesn't heal through understanding alone. It heals when the environment changes, when your daily behavior stops reinforcing the old loop. This is where people misunderstand no contact. They think it's about not texting, but the real contact isn't the message, it's the mental access. You can stop texting and still be in full contact internally. Checking, replaying, interpreting, hoping. That is still contact. Energy reclamation means you don't just remove the person from your phone, you remove them from your automatic attention. You stop giving them free rent in the center of your day. And that starts with one honest inventory. Where does your energy go when you're alone? Not where you want it to go, where it actually goes. What do you do in the first quiet moment of the morning? What do you do at night when the world goes silent? That's the real measurement, because those are the moments that reveal what still owns you. Now, here's the part that makes this healing instead of harsh. You don't reclaim energy by attacking yourself. You reclaim it by redesigning your habits with compassion and firmness. If your triggers are everywhere, photos, chats, old playlists, shared locations, your nervous system will keep getting pulled back. So you don't prove strength by staring at triggers. You remove them like you would remove alcohol from a house if you were trying to recover. Not because you're fragile, because you're serious. You're building a new internal climate, and climate changes require boundaries. Then comes the second layer, replacement, because the mind hates a vacuum. If you simply stop thinking about them without giving your attention a new home, your mind will drift back like it always has. So you place your attention somewhere that can actually return value. Your body, your craft, your environment, your routine. Small physical actions matter here more than speeches. Clean your space, train your body, build one project you can touch. Give your nervous system evidence that your life is moving forward without the old story. This is the strange miracle of energy reclamation. The more you invest your attention into what is alive in front of you, the less power the past has to haunt you. Not because you forced yourself to forget, but because you gave your mind something real to hold. And slowly, the emotional charge weakens, not through denial, but through disuse. Like a path in the woods that disappears when no one walks it anymore. And once your attention begins returning to you, you'll feel the next identity shift approaching, the one that changes the entire posture of your life. Because the moment you stop orbiting what left you, you start building a center again. You stop being a satellite. You begin becoming the sun. And when your energy finally starts returning to you, when your attention stops leaking into old memories and imaginary conversations, you begin to feel something unfamiliar at first, a kind of quiet emptiness. Not the painful emptiness of rejection, but the empty space that appears when a long obsession loses its grip. Many people panic at that moment and run back to noise, back to checking, back to just one last look, because the mind hates open space. But that open space is exactly where your power grows. This is where you stop living as a satellite around someone else's gravity and start rebuilding your own center. A satellite doesn't have its own direction. It moves according to what it orbits. And emotionally, that's what attachment does. Your mood rises and falls based on their behavior. Your self-image shifts based on their attention. Your sense of future depends on whether they might return. Even your silence becomes a performance aimed at their eyes. That's orbiting. And the tragedy is that orbiting feels like love, but it's really dependency disguised as devotion. Becoming the sun means something very different. It means you become the source again. You don't wait for warmth, you generate it. You don't chase meaning, you build it. You don't need someone's reaction to feel real. You become real by the way you live. This isn't ego, it's stability. It's what the Stoics meant by inner sovereignty. Your life is guided by your own principles, not by the emotional weather outside you. Here's how you know you're still orbiting. Your mind keeps asking, what are they doing? Do they miss me? Did they move on? That's not curiosity. That's submission. It's your attention asking for orders. The sun doesn't ask for orders. The sun sets its own rhythm. It doesn't need permission to shine. It simply does. Now, becoming the sun doesn't mean you become cold. It doesn't mean you pretend you don't care. It means you stop making your care a contract. It means your love, if it was love, doesn't turn into begging. It turns into dignity. Because dignity is what remains when you finally stop abandoning yourself for connection. This is where a lot of people misunderstand Stoicism. They think it's emotional suppression. It's not. It's emotional leadership. It's the ability to feel grief without letting grief choose your next move. It's the ability to miss someone without chasing them. It's the ability to remember without returning. That is strength. Quiet strength. The kind that doesn't announce itself. Becoming the sun is also practical. It means your days start having a center again. You don't wake up and check emotional weather. You wake up and build. You build your body, your work, your home, your future. You give your nervous system a new anchor. Routine, discipline, forward motion. Not manic hustle, steady structure. Because structure is how you teach your mind that your life is not over just because one relationship ended. Structure is how you communicate to your own soul. We are still here. We are still moving. And here's the paradox that makes this point so powerful. The moment you stop orbiting them, you often become more felt than ever. Not because you're trying to be missed, but because your energy is no longer pleading. It's grounded. It's whole. People sense that. They sense when you're not trying to pull anything from them. And whether they return or not becomes irrelevant, because you've graduated from needing their reaction as proof of your worth. This is where your silence becomes different. It's no longer tactical, it's no longer charged, it's no longer a message. It's simply the natural byproduct of a life that has a center again, and that leads us to the next essential shift, the final trap that keeps people hooked even after they've reclaimed their energy. The negotiation with the past, the endless if only, the quiet bargaining that prevents the heart from closing the chapter. And that's the moment most people don't realize they're still tethered. Even after they've reclaimed energy and rebuilt a center, the mind keeps negotiating with the past. Not loudly, quietly, privately, in the background. It bargains in the form of if only. If only I said it differently. If only I noticed sooner. If only they understood. If only I hadn't trusted. If only they came back and gave me one clean sentence that would make the whole story make sense. And as long as that bargaining continues, you haven't fully left the relationship. You've just moved it into your head. This is where Stoicism becomes more than discipline. This is where it becomes liberation. The Stoics had a phrase that sounds poetic until you understand what it actually demands. Amor fati, love your fate. Not because everything that happened was good, and not because pain should be romanticized, but because resisting reality is a second wound. The first wound is what happened. The second wound is the endless internal argument with what happened. That second wound can last for years. It can quietly drain the life out of you while you're still functioning on the surface. Negotiating with the past feels like intelligence, but it's usually just pain trying to regain control. The mind believes that if it can explain the story perfectly, it can undo the feeling. But explanation doesn't rewind time. The past doesn't respond to your logic. And the more you try to mentally fix what already occurred, the more you strengthen the attachment, because you keep revisiting the same emotional rooms, hoping the furniture has moved. Amor fati is the moment you stop trying to win that argument. It's not passive acceptance. It's a decision to stop bleeding into what cannot be changed. You look at what happened without flinching, without decorating it, without minimizing it, and you say, this is part of my story. Not, this was fair, not, this was necessary, but this is real. And then you do something that feels almost impossible at first. You stop demanding a different past in order to have a peaceful present. The strange thing is, when you stop negotiating, the mind gets quieter. Not instantly, but noticeably, because the mind is exhausted from carrying two realities at once, the reality that happened and the reality you wish happened. That split is where suffering multiplies. When you unify the story, when you stop trying to live in an alternate timeline, your nervous system starts to settle. It finally receives a clear message. The war is over. We're not going back to fix it. We're going forward to build from it. This is also where forgiveness gets misunderstood. Amor fati doesn't mean you excuse what they did. It means you stop letting what they did control your inner climate. It means you stop giving the past veto power over your future. It means you stop treating closure as something they owe you, and you begin creating closure as something you choose. A practical way to feel this is to notice the moment your mind starts replaying. When the replay begins, it's usually because you want a different ending. So instead of indulging the replay or fighting it aggressively, you label it with calm precision. This is negotiation. And then you return to what is real now, your breath, your body, your day, your next action. You don't do it once, you do it repeatedly, like retraining a muscle. Over time, the brain learns that the loop no longer pays. The replay loses its charge, not because you forced yourself to forget, but because you stopped feeding it with hope for a different past. Amor fati is the internal sentence that ends the bargaining. I accept that this happened, and I refuse to live there. And once that acceptance becomes steady, something beautiful and terrifying happens at the same time. Your silence becomes effortless, not tactical, not dramatic, not meant to send a message, just natural, because there's nothing left to argue, nothing left to prove, and nothing left to extract from someone who no longer has permission to define you. And that's where we arrive at the next shift. The silence that doesn't announce itself, the kind of quiet that isn't a strategy at all, but a standard you live by. And once you stop negotiating with the past, the quiet that follows is different from anything you've felt before. It's not the tense quiet of someone trying to hold the line. It's not the dramatic quiet of someone hoping their absence will be interpreted correctly. It's a silence that doesn't need to announce itself, because it isn't a message. It's a condition, a natural outcome of an inner chapter that's finally closed. Most people think silence is powerful because it creates mystery. They treat it like a social tool, a psychological move, a way to pull attention back. But that kind of silence is still dependent. It still asks for a witness. It still needs the other person to notice, to feel, to react, to validate that you mattered. And the Stoic version of peace doesn't work like that. Stoic silence isn't a tactic. It's self-respect in its quietest form. When your silence doesn't announce itself, you stop needing to explain what you're doing. You stop telling friends, "I'm not talking to them anymore," as if you're making a public pledge. You stop checking whether they saw your silence the way you meant it. You stop hoping they'll read between the lines and finally understand your worth. Because the truth is, if your peace requires interpretation, it's not peace, it's performance. And the moment you step out of performance, something inside you relaxes in a way that feels almost like returning home. This is the silence of someone who has nothing left to argue, nothing left to prove, nothing left to extract. It's the silence of a person who has moved their center of gravity back into themselves, where it belongs. Your phone can sit there without feeling like a loaded weapon. A message can appear without pulling you into a spiral. Their name can exist in the world without taking over your inner world. Not because you're numb, but because you're no longer available for the old dance. There's a maturity to this that people often misunderstand. They'll call it cold. They'll call it pride. They'll call it ego. But what it really is alignment. Your thoughts, your actions, and your self-respect finally agree with each other. You're not trying to punish. You're not trying to teach a lesson. You're not trying to win. You're simply choosing not to reopen a door that led you away from yourself. And here's what makes this silence so powerful. It's stable. Tactical silence collapses the moment loneliness hits, or nostalgia softens the edges, or you convince yourself you just want closure. But the silence that doesn't announce itself doesn't depend on mood. It's not fueled by anger. It's not maintained by pride. It's maintained by something much deeper, a standard. Because once you reach this kind of quiet, you start to understand that your peace isn't a feeling you beg for, it's a rule you live by. And that's where the final step of this whole journey begins, turning silence into a standard that doesn't break, even when your emotions try to bargain again. And that brings us to the final shift, because once your silence stops being a tactic and becomes a natural quiet, you still face one last test, the one that decides whether this change is temporary or permanent. It's the test that comes on the random nights when you feel lonely, the mornings when nostalgia hits like a scent in the air, The weekends when your mind starts romanticizing what hurt you. In those moments, the question isn't, will I break no contact? The real question is, do I have a standard, or do I just have a mood? A mood is fragile. It depends on sleep, on stress, on boredom, on a song, on a memory, on a sudden wave of longing. A mood can make you feel powerful at noon and desperate at midnight. A standard is different. A standard doesn't ask how you feel before it decides how you act. A standard is who you are when no one is watching, and you could easily slip back into the old pattern without anyone knowing. It's quiet integrity, self-respect that doesn't require an audience. This is where people misunderstand strength. They think strength is never feeling the pull. They think healing means you stop missing them. But healing doesn't mean you never feel. Healing means you don't let feelings drive the steering wheel. You can miss someone and still refuse to abandon yourself. You can have a tender moment of memory and still keep your dignity intact. You can feel the urge to reach out and still choose not to, not because you're trying to win, but because you've finally learned what it costs you to lose yourself again. A standard is a line you draw around your own soul, and it's not drawn in anger. Anger fades. It's drawn in clarity. Clarity lasts. You don't keep the standard to punish them. You keep it because you've seen the pattern. Every time you break yourself to keep a connection alive, you pay with your peace. Every time you betray your own boundaries for a moment of relief, you teach your nervous system that self-abandonment is acceptable. And that lesson is expensive. It repeats. So the standard becomes simple. I don't return to what made me smaller. I don't reopen doors that cost me my self-respect. I don't beg for understanding from people who benefited from misunderstanding me. I don't chase a version of them that only exists in my imagination. And most importantly, I don't use contact, silence, or speech to negotiate my worth. The Stoics would call this living by principle, not emotional principle, the kind you feel when you're inspired, but moral principle, the kind you live when you're tired, when you're lonely, when you're tempted. Because that's the only kind that changes your life. A standard doesn't make you bitter, it makes you stable. It doesn't make you cold. It makes you clean inside, no hidden agendas, no secret hopes, no private bargaining, just alignment. And here's the truth that quietly closes the episode. The goal was never to make them miss you. The goal was to become the person who no longer abandons themselves to keep a connection alive. Silence can be broken in a weak moment. A standard built on self-respect doesn't break. It holds you steady until your new identity becomes your normal and your peace stops feeling like something you're trying to protect and starts feeling like something you simply are. And once you have that, the title stops being a warning and becomes a graduation. Forget no contact. What hurts more than your silence is the moment you stop being reachable. Not because you're hiding, but because you're finally home in yourself. And after you build that standard, something subtle happens that almost no one talks about, because it doesn't look dramatic from the outside, but it changes your entire life from the inside. You stop needing closure as an event, and you start living closure as a state. That's the real graduation. Not the moment you stop texting, not the moment you block them, the moment you stop checking your own value against their absence. This is the quiet aftermath of real Stoic detachment. You become emotionally less available to chaos. You don't have to rehearse strength anymore. You don't have to hold yourself back with clenched teeth. Your nervous system stops treating them like an emergency. And in that calm, you reclaim something bigger than the relationship itself. You reclaim your attention. You reclaim your mornings. You reclaim your dignity as a daily posture, not a temporary stance. You'll still remember them sometimes, Of course you will. A name, a place, a season can bring a memory back. But the memory won't hijack you. It won't turn into a mission. It won't become a reason to break your own rules. It'll pass through you the way weather passes through a sky that no longer thinks every cloud is the end of the world. That's what it means to be unreachable inside yourself. Not cold, not bitter, just steady. And here's the most important part. This isn't about them anymore. It never truly was. It's about you learning the difference between love and self-abandonment. It's about you learning that your peace is not something you earn by being chosen. It's something you build by choosing yourself, consistently, quietly, even when nobody applauds it. So if you take one thing from this entire episode, let it be this. Don't measure your healing by whether they come back. Measure it by whether you come back to your body, to your values, to your future, to the part of you that was begging for you to stop leaving it behind. And if this hit you in a real way, just take a second and let it land. Then support the episode with a like so it reaches the people who are still confusing silence with freedom. Because the final truth is simple and heavy. Silence can be a tactic, and tactics can fail. But a standard built on self-respect becomes a home. And once you live from that home, you don't worry about who stays in your orbit. You're no longer a reaction. You're a life. And if you're still here with me, it means you're not looking for a trick. You're looking for relief. Real relief. The kind that doesn't depend on whether they text you tomorrow, or whether they regret it later, or whether the universe hands you a dramatic ending that finally makes the pain feel worth it. And that's the moment I want you to notice what's quietly changing in you right now. You're no longer chasing an outcome. You're choosing a state. You're choosing to stop living as a reaction. Because the deepest wound in all of this was never the breakup itself. It was the way you kept abandoning yourself afterward. Checking, hoping, rehearsing, bargaining, shrinking your world down to a single person's attention. That's what hurts even more than your silence. Not the fact that you didn't speak, but the fact that you couldn't rest. The fact that you were physically gone, yet emotionally stationed at the door like a guard who never clocks out. And the moment you stop doing that, really stop, something in your life comes back online. Your appetite for the present, your patience, your self-respect, your ability to build without needing anyone to witness it. So here's what I want you to carry forward, not as a motivational line, but as a rule you can live by when your emotions get loud. You don't need to be understood to be real. You don't need to be missed to be valuable. You don't need a final message to be free. You need a standard you can sleep with. A standard that keeps your dignity intact, even on the nights you feel lonely, even on the days your mind tries to romanticize what broke you. That's what Stoicism is at its best. Quiet self-governance. Not hardness, not numbness, just command over your own inner life. And maybe the most surprising part is that when you finally stop forcing closure from them, closure becomes something that grows inside you. It becomes that calm moment when their name appears and your body stays steady. It becomes the day you realize you haven't checked in a while. It becomes the week you build something, health, work, discipline, peace, without using them as fuel. That's the real shift. The day you stop orbiting, the day you return to your center. If you want to make this practical, keep it simple for the next 24 hours. Protect your attention like it's sacred, and don't reopen a door you already know leads you away from yourself. Just that. One day, one decision, one quiet act of loyalty to your own peace. And when you do that enough times, you won't need no contact as an identity anymore, because you'll be living something stronger than strategy. You'll be living from the kind of inner distance that isn't coldness, it's freedom. And once you start living from that freedom, even if it's only a fragile version of it at first, you'll notice a strange temptation creeping back in, usually when you're tired or alone. The temptation to explain yourself again, to rewrite the story, to make them see you the way you see yourself. And this is where the final thread of attachment often hides, because it doesn't look like longing anymore. It looks like closure. It looks like fairness. It looks like just wanting the truth to be known. But underneath it, it's still the same bargain. If they understand me, I can finally rest. Stoicism dismantles that bargain with a hard kind of mercy. It says, your peace can't be built on someone else's recognition. Not because recognition is meaningless, but because it's not yours to command. The moment you make your healing dependent on their perception, you hand them the steering wheel again. You're basically saying, my inner world will settle when you behave the way I need you to behave. And life doesn't work like that. People don't work like that. Sometimes they never get it. Sometimes they leave with a version of you in their head that feels unfair. Sometimes you become the villain in a story you never agreed to. And the painful truth is, you can't edit their narrative without re-entering the prison you just escaped. This is where amor fati becomes more than a quote. It becomes a decision. I stop negotiating with what already happened. I stop trying to win a court case in someone else's mind. I stop writing speeches for a conversation I'm not meant to have. Not because I don't have a voice, but because I respect my peace more than I respect the urge to be validated. The past is not a door you keep knocking on until it opens. The past is a room you walk out of, and the only way it stays alive is if you keep furnishing it with your attention. So you let them misunderstand, you let them simplify you, you let them keep their version, and you keep your life. That's not weakness, that's sovereignty. Because the highest form of self-respect is not proving your worth to someone who refused to see it. It's building a reality where their opinion no longer has a job. And once you do that, something inside you becomes clean. The inner arguing stops. The mental bargaining fades. The heart doesn't need to win anymore. It just needs to be whole. And when the need to be understood finally dies, the silence that remains isn't heavy, it's light. It isn't a weapon, it's a standard. Which leads us to the last step, the one that makes this change permanent, creating a life so anchored in self-respect that even if they return, even if they apologize, even if they suddenly see everything, you still won't abandon yourself to go back. And once you reach that level, where you no longer need to be understood, the next temptation is even more subtle because it doesn't feel like weakness. It feels like nobility. It feels like being the bigger person. It feels like staying available, staying kind, staying open, just in case. But this is where a lot of people quietly lose themselves again. They confuse kindness with access, and maturity with reopening a door that already proved what it costs them. This is where Stoicism becomes painfully practical, not in a cold way, in a clean way. Because the Stoic question is never, what would make me look good? It's, what protects my integrity? And integrity isn't an emotion. It's alignment. It's when what you know is true and what you actually do finally match. If you've learned that contact, direct or indirect, pulls you back into old patterns, then the mature move isn't to test yourself. The mature move is to stop offering your nervous system as a playground for someone who hasn't earned access to it. There's a kind of silence that people use as a message, and there's a kind of silence that exists because there's nothing left to say. The first one is still a negotiation. The second one is peace. It's a silence with no hook, no subtext, no hidden hope, no "maybe this will make them." It's simply the sound of a life that stopped revolving around them. And what makes it powerful is that it's stable. It doesn't require anger to sustain it. It doesn't require pride. It doesn't require constant self-control. It's just a boundary that has become natural. At this stage, you start to understand something important. The goal was never to be unreachable to them. The goal was to be reachable to yourself. Because the real problem wasn't contact or no contact. It was self-contact. The ability to stay present in your own body, your own day, your own values, without being yanked into old loops. So your silence becomes less about not replying and more about not abandoning your center. You stop making decisions based on how it will land on them, and you start making decisions based on whether it keeps you whole. And when life tests you, and it will, this is where your standard shows. Maybe you hear they're doing fine. Maybe you hear they're struggling. Maybe they send a breadcrumb message that's just enough to reopen the wound. The older version of you would interpret it, analyze it, attach meaning to it, and lose days of peace trying to decode a sentence. But the newer version of you recognizes the cost. Not the cost to your pride, the cost to your nervous system, the cost to your focus, the cost to your self-respect. And you choose clean over messy, stable over familiar, quiet over chaos. This is the silence that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to be seen to be real. It doesn't need a reaction to be validated. It's simply what happens when you stop negotiating with reality and start living with yourself again. And once you have that, there's only one final step left. The step that makes this unbreakable, turning everything you've learned into a standard that holds, not just when you're strong, but especially when you're lonely. And that brings us to the final step, because everything we've talked about, silence, detachment, boundaries, stoic clarity, none of it matters if it only works when you're having a strong day. Real transformation isn't what you do when you feel empowered. It's what you refuse to do when you feel weak. And the reason most people keep repeating the same pain is simple. They don't have a standard. They have a mood. They have a temporary burst of self-respect that collapses the moment loneliness shows up with a convincing voice. A standard is different. A standard is a quiet law you live under. It's not fueled by anger, and it doesn't need motivation to survive. It's built from one honest realization. Every time you abandon yourself to keep a connection alive, you pay with your peace. Not metaphorically, literally. Your sleep changes, your appetite changes, your focus breaks. Your nervous system goes back into that old loop of anticipation and disappointment. And after a while, you stop trusting yourself because you can't predict what you'll do when your emotions get loud. So the standard begins with self-trust. It's you saying, "I will not betray myself again." Not in a dramatic way, not as a vow you post online, but as a rule you quietly follow when nobody can see you. It's the moment you stop reopening doors that you already know lead you away from yourself. It's the moment you accept that closure is not a message you receive, it's a posture you maintain. Here's what that standard sounds like in plain language. It says, "I don't chase explanations from people who benefited from misunderstanding me. I don't prove my worth to someone who couldn't see it. I don't return to what made me smaller. I don't use contact, silence, or speech as a tool to negotiate my value. And when my mind tries to romanticize the past, I remember the cost, not the fantasy. I remember what it did to my body, my dignity, my peace. Because nostalgia is selective, a standard isn't. This is the difference between being silent and being free. Silence can be broken in a weak moment. A standard holds. A standard is what keeps your life clean when your emotions try to drag you back into chaos. And once you live with that standard long enough, something profound happens. You stop needing to be missed. You stop needing to be validated. You stop needing any dramatic ending at all. Your identity is no longer built on whether you were chosen. It's built on the fact that you chose yourself. And now the title makes sense in the deepest way. Forget no contact. Silence isn't the thing that hurts most. What hurts more, what feels almost shocking at first, is when they lose access to your nervous system. When they can't pull your mood anymore. When they can't trigger your hope, your anger, your longing. When your body stays calm. When your mind stays clean. That's the moment the game ends, because the game requires reaction. And you're no longer available, so if you're listening to this and you've been trying to do no contact like it's a strategy, I want you to hear this gently but clearly. The goal was never to make them miss you. The goal was to stop abandoning yourself. The goal was to become the kind of person who doesn't need to disappear to be powerful, because your power isn't in your absence. It's in your self-respect. It's in your peace. It's in the standard you live by when no one is applauding. Take one step today that proves you're choosing your center. One clean boundary, one honest action, one small act of loyalty to your own peace, and then do it again tomorrow. Because that's how a standard becomes a life. If this episode gave you clarity, support it with a like so it reaches the people who are still confusing silence with freedom, and then, quietly, go live what you just understood, not to prove anything to anyone, just to come home to yourself.